Have you ever wondered why French sci-fi films from the 1970s still feel stranger, bolder, and more mind-bending than anything made today? This was the decade when French directors turned science fiction into philosophy, nightmare, and art, sometimes all at once. These weren't space adventures, they were cinematic experiments that shocked audiences and redefined the genre. So, let's step back into a decade when imagination broke every rule, and the future looked beautifully bizarre. Number 10. La Planète Sauvage, Fantastic Planet, 1973. Imagine a world where humans are the pets and blue-skinned giants rule with quiet indifference. That's La Planète Sauvage, or Fantastic Planet, the film that burned its way into the subconscious of an entire generation. Directed by René Laloux and designed by Roland Topor, this stop-motion masterpiece wasn't just animation. It was a hallucinatory experience that made even the most fearless viewers uneasy. Released in 1973, the film takes place on the planet Igom, where the massive alien drags keep humans called Oms as docile animals. Some are domesticated, others roam wild, but when one human learns to read and begins spreading knowledge among his kind, the balance between species begins to fracture. The setup sounds simple, but the imagery is anything but. Every frame looks like a fever dream, painted with cosmic logic, floating heads, expanding landscapes, and creatures that defy every biological rule. What really shocked audiences wasn't the story, it was the tone. French critics called it a moral fable wrapped in a nightmare. American audiences used to clean-cut space adventures found it terrifying and hypnotic in equal measure. It won the Grand Prix at Cannes for animated feature, but was banned in several regions for disturbing psychological content. Fantastic Planet didn't just challenge animation, it reinvented it. It said that sci-fi could be philosophical, poetic, and deeply unsettling all at once. Today its fingerprints are everywhere, from Pink Floyd album art to Rick and Morty. It's not just a film, it's a warning from another universe. Number 9. Black Moon, 1975. Louis Malle wasn't known for making comfort films, and Black Moon might be his strangest creation. On paper, it's a post-apocalyptic tale about a world where men and women are at war. But on screen, it becomes something entirely different, half dream, half delirium, all French surrealism turned inside out. Released in 1975, the story follows a young woman named Lily, who flees a chaotic civil war and finds refuge in a country mansion. There she encounters a bizarre cast of characters, a talking unicorn, a mute brother and sister, and a dying old woman who communicates through a radio. There's no logic, no clear plot, just the disintegration of reason as the world collapses around her. Malle himself called it an unconscious film, meaning it was built like a dream. Every image feels familiar, yet impossible to explain. Critics were split. Some called it genius. Others accused Malle of making cinema for aliens. But that's the point. Black Moon works like a mirror. It reflects whatever madness the viewer brings to it. The cinematography by Sven Nykvist, known for his collaborations with Ingmar Bergman, bathes everything in soft, ghostly light, making even fields and flowers feel like they're breathing. For audiences in the 1970s, it was too much a film without rules, without anchors, and without an exit. But over time, Black Moon has earned a cult following as one of the boldest experiments in European sci-fi. It's not a story you understand, it's one you absorb, and once it gets inside your head, it never leaves. Number 8. Le Secret, The Secret, 1974. Some secrets are too big to survive the truth. Le Secret, directed by Robert Enrico and released in 1974, begins with a man bursting into a farmhouse, claiming he's escaped from a secret government prison. He swears he's seen something extraordinary, something so dangerous that the authorities will stop at nothing to silence him. But as the hours pass, doubt creeps in. Is he telling the truth, or is he losing his mind? Jean-Louis Trintignant gives a haunting performance as the fugitive, David, a man constantly caught between panic and conviction. He's calm one moment, unhinged the next, forcing both the characters and the audience to question whether his story is real. Enrico builds the tension with quiet precision. There are no futuristic gadgets or alien worlds here, just the heavy sense that someone, somewhere, is always watching. What shocked audiences wasn't spectacle, but plausibility. Every phone call, every empty road, every sudden silence feels like a trap. The film mirrors the paranoia of 70s France, a society surrounded by Cold War secrets and new surveillance technologies. It suggests that the true sci-fi horror isn't invasion or apocalypse, it's knowing something the world refuses to believe. Cinematically, Le Secret is stripped down to essentials: fog-covered landscapes, low light, and faces half hidden in shadow. The absence of answers makes it even more unsettling. By the end, you're left wondering whether the real secret was ever out there or buried deep in the human need to find meaning in chaos. Number 7. Traitement de choc, shock treatment, 1973. What if the secret to eternal youth wasn't a miracle cream or futuristic surgery, but something far darker? Traitement de choc, directed by Alain Jesua, took that question and served it cold. Released in 1973, this film unsettled audiences with a simple premise: an elite spa that promises rejuvenation through mysterious treatments. What begins as a story about vanity slowly morphs into a clinical nightmare about exploitation in the name of beauty. Annie Girardot stars as Hélène, a wealthy woman who retreats to a seaside health clinic run by Dr. Develers, played by Alain Delon, charismatic, calm, and just a bit too perfect. Patients emerge looking radiant, glowing with new life. But Hélène starts to notice something off. The staff behaves oddly, the food tastes strange, and young locals keep disappearing without explanation. The horror here isn't supernatural, it's ethical. Jesua uses science fiction as a scalpel, dissecting the obsession with youth and the silent cruelty behind privilege. By the time Hélène uncovers the truth that the clinic's miracle treatments depend on draining vitality from unwilling human sources, the film transforms into a moral reckoning. French audiences were stunned. The film mixed sci-fi class commentary and psychological unease into something uncomfortably real. Critics praised its intelligence, but admitted it left them shaken. The sleek visuals and haunting sound design gave it a sterile beauty, making the terror feel disturbingly elegant. Traitement de choc predicted a future where wellness could hide something sinister behind its white walls, a theme that still feels relevant today. It's not just a warning about science gone wrong, but about the human appetite for perfection, no matter the cost. Number 6. Les Raisins de la Mort, The Grapes of Death, 1978. Jean Rollin was known for gothic fantasy and dreamlike horror, but in Les Raisins de la Mort, he traded castles for vineyards and created one of the most unsettling ecological sci-fi films of the decade. Released in 1978, the movie begins with an idyllic French wine region where something invisible lurks inside the bottles, a chemical contaminant that turns the villagers violent and mindless. It sounds like a horror plot, but Rollin approached it like a slow-motion tragedy. The protagonist, Elisabeth, played by Marie-Georges Pascal, arrives in the countryside to visit her fiancé only to find a ghost town. The vineyards are deserted, the roads empty, and the locals, disfigured, bleeding, and whispering incoherently, stagger through the fields. As she moves from house to house, she pieces together the cause. An experimental pesticide used on the grapes has mutated, creating a disease that destroys the mind. Rollin's background in surreal cinema makes the story feel both poetic and terrifying. The pacing is hypnotic. Silence stretches out and violence comes without rhythm. It's not about shock for its own sake, it's about atmosphere, decay, and guilt. The infected villagers aren't monsters, they're victims of industrial ambition. French audiences were horrified. The film's mixture of science fiction and biological horror was rare for its time, and the idea of something as ordinary as wine becoming deadly hit close to home. It was censored in some areas, praised in others, and later gained cult status for its eerie tone and haunting visuals. Les Raisins de la Mort remains one of the earliest French films to connect environmental damage with human destruction. It's a sci-fi parable about how progress unchecked can rot the very roots it grows from. Number 5. Le Jeu avec le Feu, Playing with Fire, 1975. What if safety itself was just another illusion? Le Jeu avec le Feu, released in 1975 and directed by Alain Robbe-Grillet, is one of the strangest, most hypnotic French sci-fi thrillers of the decade. It begins with a simple premise. A banker's daughter is kidnapped, and her father hires a private detective to find her. But the deeper he searches, the more reality itself starts to slip away. Nothing in this film makes sense in a normal way. People appear and vanish. Scenes repeat with tiny differences, and beneath it all runs a quiet terror, the sense that everyone is being watched. Hidden cameras, shadowy corridors, and mirrored rooms turn Paris into a maze of control. It's less about who took the girl and more about who's watching the story unfold. Robbe-Grillet, famous for Last Year at Marienbad, uses science fiction not as decoration, but as disorientation. The film explores a world where surveillance is the new form of power, where memory can't be trusted, and where truth is just another performance. When it premiered, audiences were confused, even angered. Was it satire? Was it horror? Or was it a warning about how control and desire blur until they're the same thing? Over time, critics began to see it as prophetic a vision of the modern world, built on invisible eyes and unseen rules. Visually elegant and emotionally cold, Le Jeu avec le Feu still feels ahead of its time. It's a sci-fi film without spaceships or monsters, just humans lost inside systems they don't understand. Number 4. Les Maîtres du Temps, Time Masters, 1979. What happens when a children's adventure hides one of the most profound time travel twists in science fiction history? You get Les Maîtres du Temps. Time Masters, the second collaboration between director René Laloux and legendary illustrator Jean Moebius Giraud. Though released in 1982, it was developed throughout the late 70s and carries the unmistakable pulse of that era's surrealist imagination. The story begins with a boy named Piel, stranded on a dangerous planet after a spaceship accident. His only link to safety is a radio connection with Jafar, a space pilot racing across galaxies to save him. Along the way, Jafar picks up a group of eccentric travelers, tiny telepathic creatures, a rebellious woman, and an old scientist with secrets of his own. What seems like a simple rescue mission slowly unfolds into something far deeper, an emotional riddle about time, destiny, and the way the universe connects its threads. Moebius's visual style turns every scene into a painting. The ships glide through glowing nebulas, alien landscapes pulse with life, and the tone swings between wonder and melancholy. But the shock comes in the final revelation, a twist that reframes the entire story and leaves viewers stunned in quiet disbelief. When it finally released, internationally, Time Masters caught critics off guard. Audiences expecting a children's cartoon found a cosmic poem, instead one that dealt with loss, choice, and the cyclical nature of time. It's the kind of film that sneaks up on you, gentle at first, then devastating. Les Maîtres du Temps bridges the innocence of animation with the emotional weight of adult storytelling. It's proof that French sci-fi never needed giant budgets to move the soul, just imagination, courage, and a willingness to ask the most impossible questions. Number 3. Les Chiens, The Dogs, 1979. If Les Raisins de l'Amour warned about chemical chaos, Les Chiens warned about something even more human, fear itself. Directed by Alain Jesua, returning to science fiction after shock treatment, this 1979 film explored what happens when society becomes addicted to protection. The result was one of the most quietly chilling films of the decade. The story centers on a young doctor, played by Gérard Lanvin, who moves to a small, eerily clean suburb outside Paris. The town seems peaceful, perfect lawns, smiling neighbors, but there's something off. Every resident owns a trained attack dog, and the local security expert, played by Victor Lanoux, runs nightly demonstrations where the dogs rip through mock intruders. What begins as a neighborhood precaution soon turns into collective paranoia. As the doctor settles in, he realizes the entire town is under psychological siege. No crime exists anymore because fear has replaced it. The dogs, once symbols of safety, become extensions of anxiety, guardians of a community that no longer trusts itself. Jesua uses minimalism to build dread. No jump scares, just silence, empty streets, and barking echoing across polished homes. When Les Chiens premiered, audiences didn't know how to react. Some saw it as satire, others as prophecy. It was a subtle but brutal commentary on the late 70s rise in urban insecurity, and it asked a terrifying question. What if safety becomes the new form of control? The final scenes show that once fear takes root, it doesn't need a threat. It is the threat. In a world now filled with surveillance cameras and gated living, Le Chien feels less like a relic and more like a mirror. Number 2. La Mort en Direct, Death Watch, 1979. Before reality shows, before streaming obsessions, there was La Mort en Direct, Bertrand Tavernier's haunting look at voyeurism and technology. Released in 1979, it stars Romy Schneider and Harvey Keitel in a story that feels disturbingly prophetic. In this near-future world, death has become entertainment and privacy no longer exists. Keitel plays Roddy, a man with a camera surgically implanted in his eyes. His job is to secretly film Catherine, a terminally ill woman, played by Schneider, for a live television broadcast. The show's producers plan to turn her final days into a national spectacle under the pretense of raising awareness. But as Roddy spends time with her, something inside him begins to crack. He starts to see her not as a subject, but as a person, while the world continues to consume her pain as primetime content. Tavernier's direction is calm, but merciless. There are no villains in suits, twirling mustaches, just people so desensitized they no longer recognize cruelty. The cinematography by Pierre William Glenn, with its muted colors and haunting Glasgow backdrops, gives the film an almost documentary feel. When it premiered, audiences were disturbed. Many didn't realize it was science fiction until halfway through. It felt too plausible. The film didn't rely on special effects. It relied on emotion. What made it shocking was how ordinary it all seemed. La Mort en Direct predicted an entire era of mediated suffering, decades before social media live streams or viral empathy. Watching it today feels like déjà vu. It's not a warning anymore, it's a record of the world we built. Number 1. Le Gendarme et les Extraterrestres, The Gendarme and the Extraterrestrials, 1979. Just when you think French sci-fi can't get any stranger, it turns out it can also be hilarious. Le Gendarme et les Extraterrestres, directed by Jean Giraud, proved that comedy and science fiction could collide with chaotic brilliance. Released in 1979, it stars the legendary Louis de Funès as the bumbling yet determined police officer Ludovic Cruchot, this time facing the most absurd threat imaginable: shape-shifting extraterrestrials invading Saint-Tropez. The aliens mimic humans perfectly right down to the uniforms of Cruchot's gendarme squad, but there's one giveaway: they drink motor oil. What follows is a whirlwind of mistaken identities, slapstick chases, and over-the-top special effects that somehow manage to be both silly and unnerving. The film walks a tightrope between parody and genuine unease, turning everyday French life into a stage for cosmic absurdity. Audiences went wild, kids loved the humor, adults were quietly unsettled. Beneath the laughter, the movie hinted at deeper fears, the idea that the people around you might not be who they seem. It played on the same paranoia that fueled Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but through the lens of French farce. Critics initially dismissed it as lightweight, but its mix of comedy and sci-fi spectacle made it one of the decade's biggest hits. It showed that even within a genre known for philosophy and experimentation, France could still laugh at the end of the world and make it look effortless. Le Gendarme et les Extraterrestres may have been wrapped in jokes, but it left a lasting mark. It reminded audiences that science fiction doesn't always have to terrify. It can also entertain, provoke, and remind us how strange we truly are. So, what did French cinema teach the world in the 1970s? That science fiction doesn't need lasers or empires to blow your mind, it just needs imagination. These films proved that the strangest stories often hold the sharpest truths. From philosophical nightmares to ecological warnings and surreal comedies, they didn't just shock, they expanded what movies could be. Which one of these would you dare to watch first? Tell us below and keep exploring the unexplored.